He came in every morning at 8:05. Not a minute earlier. Not a minute later. Same tattered windbreaker, same sun-faded baseball cap pulled low over his eyes. In one hand he carried a small leather-bound notebook. In the other, a green duffel bag with frayed straps and a broken zipper. The local cafe staff barely glanced up when he walked in. They'd seen him so many times. Most of them just called him Gramps, or the old vet. A few snickered quietly when he muttered things to himself. He always sat in the corner, booth by the window. Sometimes he stared outside for hours, barely touching his lukewarm coffee. Other times, he scribbled into that little notebook as if time hadn't moved on around him. People joked that he wasn't all there. Poor guy. Thinks he's still on some battlefield, they'd whisper. Kids sometimes laughed when he hummed military tunes under his breath, or saluted no one in particular. Nobody took him seriously, but he never reacted, never snapped, never raised his voice, just sat there, morning after morning, with the kind of silence that didn't ask for sympathy or attention. Only respect, but no one seemed to notice that part. One day, a group of young Marines entered the cafe. It was casual, nothing formal. They were on break from a nearby base, laughing and talking loudly, their crisp uniforms drawing curious glances. Among them was a Marine captain, clean-cut, focused, not one to waste words. As they waited for their food, the captain's eyes scanned the room. That's when he noticed the old man. At first, it was just a glance, a nod, the way soldiers often acknowledge each other out of habit. But then something caught his eye, a gleam of metal as the old man raised his coffee cup. It was a ring, not just any ring. The captain's face shifted, subtle, but immediate. He leaned forward, squinting slightly, then stood up. The other Marines quieted, sensing the shift in his demeanor. The captain walked over, slow and steady. He stopped at the edge of the old man's table. "Excuse me, sir," he said. "That ring, is that Echo 72? The old man didn't speak right away. He slowly looked up, his eyes sharper than anyone had seen in years. He tilted his head, then tapped the ring twice on the table. "All the way to the drop zone," he said quietly. Just like that, everything changed. The captain stepped back, stood at attention, and saluted. A real salute. It's not out of politeness, but out of raw, earned respect. The cafe fell silent, utterly still. The Marines behind him rose, their chairs scraping the floor as they too stood tall. People who had just been laughing over breakfast now stared with wide eyes. The man they'd called a lunatic, a weirdo, a forgotten relic, was now being saluted by a United States Marine. "Captain?" The captain asked if he could sit. The old man nodded once. They didn't say much. They didn't have to. It was the kind of conversation only soldiers could have, where the words are few, but the weight behind them is everything. The captain had studied the Echo 722 unit in training, but it was considered one of those ghost squads officially erased after a classified mission decades ago. Most assumed all of them were either gone or living quietly off the radar. Ring was unmistakable. Only 5 were ever made. The captain asked one last question. "You were in the ridges, weren't you?" The old man's lips curved just slightly. "We lost too many there," he said. Then he tapped the notebook. "But I remember them all." Captain didn't ask to see it. He knew better. The conversation didn't last more than 10 minutes. But it left the air thick with something unspoken. Reverence. History. Loss. When the captain stood to leave, he reached into his pocket and placed a challenge coin on the table. "Not a token on honor. For valor, sir," he said. The old man nodded once, eyes steady. For memory, he replied. That day, no one laughed at him. No one looked at him the same. The barista who used to roll her eyes when he came in now greeted him with quiet respect. A man who once sat alone each morning now had people holding the door for him. A few regulars apologized in hushed voices. He never responded with bitterness. Just a small nod, a little smile as if to say, "You didn't know. It's okay." And yet, he never changed his routine. Still came in at 8:05, still ordered the same coffee, still sat by the window. The difference now was in the silence. It wasn't empty anymore. It was full of respect, of questions, People didn't dare ask of stories too heavy for breakfast conversations. One morning, local reporter came in, asked if she could interview him. "People would love to know your story," she said. He looked up from his notebook, smiled gently, and shook his head. "Some stories aren't meant for the papers," he said. "Some are meant to be carried." A week later, he wasn't there. 8:05 came and went. The booth by the window stayed empty. A hush fell over the cafe. No one said anything, but everyone felt it. The old man had moved on either to another cafe or somewhere beyond reach. The captain returned one last time, sat in the same seat, and ordered the same coffee. When it arrived, he tapped the cup twice on the table. Then he left, quietly, slipping the old man's coin into his pocket. The booth remains empty to this day. But sometimes when the sun hits that corner just right, you'd swear you could see a ring glinting in the light. A reminder that legends don't always look like they do in books. Sometimes they walk among us, quiet and unseen, till someone finally sees them. Weeks passed, but the old man's presence never really left. People still glanced toward the window booth at 8:05, half expecting him to shuffle in with his quiet dignity. The waitress started pouring a small cup of coffee and setting it at his usual spot every morning, not as a gesture of denial, but out of silent respect. No one ever touched that cup. It sat there until it went cold, just like he used to drink it. The booth had become something more than a seat. It was a symbol, a reminder of the quiet courage we often walk past without noticing. One day, a small package arrived at the cafe. No return address, just a weathered envelope with a single name: the captain. Inside was the old man's notebook, wrapped in a folded American flag. No note, no explanation. Just the weight of every name, every mission, every memory he had. Carried for decades now, passed on to someone who would understand. The captain didn't say much when he picked it up. He just placed the flag on the seat, rested his hand on the notebook for a few seconds, and walked out carrying the legacy forward. Now, younger Marines from the base come by sometimes, not to eat, but to sit for a minute, to reflect, to remember a man they never met but somehow feel connected to. They say nothing. They simply nod, tap the table twice like he did, and leave. Because respect, like honor, doesn't always need an audience. Sometimes it just needs to be seen by someone who truly understands. Not long after, the cafe owner had a small brass plaque made and placed just above the booth's window. It read, "Reserved for the quiet heroes." No date, no name. Just those 4 words, enough for those who knew. Over time, people from the community started leaving small items on the table. A folded newspaper, single white rose, even a child's drawing of a soldier and an old man side by side. None of it was asked for. It just happened. Because some legacies echo louder when no one's speaking. Years later, the story of the crazy old man with the ring still comes up. New Marines hear it from the captain himself, now promoted and still carrying the notebook with him. He tells them not just about the battles or the ring, but about the kind of strength that hides in silence. It's the kind of service that doesn't demand recognition, but deserves the world. And every time he ends the story, he says the same words. If you ever see someone sitting alone, ask his name before you judge his mind. You might be looking at a lion in disguise.